Hello and welcome back to Vintage Disney here on Brian's Things That Are Cool. Today's episode will be a character profile on Donald Duck. So in honor of Donald Duck, I will not be wearing pants for this video. Just kidding, I never wear pants. As a little jingle that started every one of his cartoons assured us, he's got the sweetest disposition and never starts an argument or shows a bit of temperament. He's never wrong but always right and would never dream of starting a fight. Who always gets stuck with all the bad luck? No one but Donald Duck. From an unhelpful friend to the little red hen, to high-flying adventure with his nephews Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and his uncle, Uncle Scrooge, Donald Duck has had quite the life. Our story begins way back in 1934 when Donald Duck took a supporting role in the Silly Symphony short, The Wise Little Hen. Animators Art Babbitt and Richard Humer animated Donald and his friend Peter Pig for The Wise Little Hen. The short, based off of the American fable The Little Red Hen, tells the story of a hen trying to get help planting and then harvesting corn, only to be turned down by Donald and Peter, who fake stomach aches to get out of having to work. When they realize all this hard work made yummy food, and they're going to miss out because they refuse to help, they act accordingly. Directed by Wilford Jackson, The Wise Little Hen became the 45th animated short in Walt Disney's Silly Symphony series and was first shown on May 3, 1934 for a benefit at Carthay Circle Theater, where Walt would later hold the premiere of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, before having its official premiere on June 7th at Radio City Music Hall. The original Carthay Circle Theater was demolished in 1969, but Walt Disney World in Florida has built a beautiful recreation in their Hollywood Studios park, which is one of their gift shops. Donald's instantly recognizable look was there from day one, for the most part. His colors and his sailor suit are there, but 1930s Donald had a slightly different look. His beak was longer, his feet were shorter, and his personality had yet to be developed by animator Dick Lundy. Lundy got his chance as sole animator on Donald's second short, Orphan's Benefit, giving the duck an ego and his famous temper. Giving Donald's ego and temper a voice was Disney legend Clarence Nash. Born in Oklahoma on December 7, 1904, growing up Clarence had a lot of pets, including a billy goat, and he took to imitating the sounds they made. It was while imitating this goat that Clarence discovered a way of producing sound from his mouth using his cheek instead of his voice box. This trick eventually led to Donald's distinctive voice. Vaudeville led Clarence to Los Angeles, where he got a job entertaining school children for the Ador Milk Company. It was there he picked up the nickname Whistling Clarence the Ador Birdman. A friend of his got him a job on a radio program called The Merrymakers. A few years later, he asked to make another appearance on the program, and it just so happened that Walt was listening to that show. Walt at the time was looking for a duck voice for his newest animated short, The Wise Little Hen. Clarence was so skilled in mimicking animal noises that after hearing an eagle during a walk through Griffith Park, he developed an imitation so good that he was asked to provide the eagle's voice in the Mickey Mouse cartoon, The Alpine Climbers.
Eagle's egg.
He also provided the original voices of Huey, Dewey, and Louie, Figaro Cat from Pinocchio, and even Mr. Bluebird in Song of the South.
Why is that bluebird?
During World War II, Clarence became a regular performer at the USO shows, performing with a ventriloquist puppet of Donald, which was built by Disney's modeling department. Clarence semi-retired in 1971, choosing to spend his time visiting children's hospitals with his ventriloquist puppet of Donald, entertaining sick children. With the exception of a few commercials here and there, his final performance as Donald was in the 1983 short Mickey's Christmas Carol. Clarence passed away on February 20th, 1985. Ducky, as he was known around the studio, brought Donald to life and brought so much joy to the world, he'll never be forgotten. The last half of the 1930s saw Donald's fame continue to rise. As comedy troupes were in vogue at the time, Donald would often find himself paired with his friends Goofy and Mickey, including one of my favorite Disney shorts ever, Lonesome Ghost from 1937. 1936 would see a redesign for Donald, a shorter beak, longer feet, and an overall more fully developed look. After this bit of cosmetic surgery, Donald got his first solo cartoon short with Don Donald, in which he met his girlfriend, Donna Duck, who would of course later be renamed Daisy. 1938 would see the Duck family grow even more when Donald's nephews Huey, Dewey, and Louie made their first appearance. Unfortunately, just as everything was going right for Donald and Walt Disney Studios as a whole, the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941 would bring this country into war. Walt's studio was commandeered by the US government to make training films and propaganda shorts, and that meant Donald would soon be receiving his draft notice. Donald Gets Drafted premiered on May 1, 1942, and was the first of 6 propaganda shorts following Donald's life in the Army. It's in Donald Gets Drafted that we learn by looking at his selective service draft card that Donald's full name is Donald Fauntleroy Duck. Another propaganda short of note was Der Fuhrer's Face, in which Donald has a nightmare that he's a Nazi, losing his identity more and more as he becomes nothing but a small part of the machine. When Donald wakes up, he realizes he's still an American, and he feels a renewed sense of pride for his country. Der Fuhrer's Face not only contains Spike Jonze's hit song of the same name, but won the 1942 Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film. Walt was no doubt a patriot, but as a creative, bristled at his loss of control during the war effort. There weren't that many instances of him butting heads with government officials during this time, because, in all honesty, what can you do? But one government-funded Donald short in particular did bring out Walt's temper. In December of 1942, the Treasury Department contacted Walt saying they had an urgent special project for him. Walt flew out to Washington, D.C. thinking he'd be asked to make some shorts promoting war bonds, but when he got there, Secretary of the Treasury, Henry Morgenthau, laid out his idea to have Walt sell people on the idea of paying income tax. He also didn't give Walt much time to make the picture, saying he wanted it in theaters by February. Walt and his crew worked around the clock on the film, and when they had all the storyboards completed, Walt flew back to D.C. to show them to Morgenthau. Walt went into one of his theatrical performances acting out every part of the story of Donald Duck becoming the ultimate patriot, except when it came to taxes. Donald is shown the error of his ways when he's informed taxes will help win the war, and with American flags in his eyes, he rushes out to file his taxes early. When Walt finished, the room was silent. Morgenthau's aide said, "Well, I thought you'd create a new character named Mr. Taxpayer." Morgenthau's secretary said, "I don't like Donald Duck." And Morgenthau said nothing. Walt couldn't hide his anger. "I've given you Donald Duck. At our studio, that's the equivalent of giving you Clark Gable out of MGM. Donald Duck is known by the American public. He'll open doors to theaters. They won't be running a cartoon of Mr. Taxpayer. They'll be running a Donald Duck cartoon. By giving you this, I'll be losing money. Every theater that plays this short will knock off a Donald Duck cartoon that would have been booked. I did it because I want this thing to be successful. I felt it was the only way to tell the story by using a character they know and putting him in a situation that they themselves will be in. If you don't like this, I'll have to throw it out. I'll have to throw away half the picture because it's already in work." Morgenthau looked at Walt and said, "I'll leave it to you." The stress of the US government essentially running his studio wasn't Walt's only headache. Disney's pro-American propaganda shorts brought the ire of Adolf Hitler, who banned Disney from importing their films into occupied Europe, meaning a massive drop in revenue for Walt. Luckily, the United States Department of State asked Walt to take a goodwill tour to South America as an ambassador, and make 2 films to counteract the Latin American countries who had ties to Nazi Germany. The films became Saludos Amigos, which came out in 1942, and The Three Caballeros, which came out in 1944. They would feature live-action color footage of Walt's trip and cartoon segments featuring Donald. The films are a fascinating piece of history, and were expanded on in a 2009 documentary called Walt and El Grupo. Donald and his buddies Panchito Pistoles and Jose Caraca from The Three Caballeros were even given their own ride, which opened on April 6, 2007 at Walt Disney World in Epcot's Mexico Pavilion. After the war, life went back to normal for most Americans, but Donald would find a new role in his animated shorts: to be pestered by everyone and everything. After the war, less animated shorts were put into production, with Mickey being the hardest hit. Walt didn't like goofy shorts and was always eager to stop production on them, but gave in just to give his animators work. Donald was the only one unaffected and flourished in post-war Disney. Disney's animated shorts after the war generally saw their characters settle into suburbia, and Donald was no exception. The problem is Donald could never get a minute's peace. He faced new foes, such as Chip and Dale, Spike the Bee, Humphrey the Bear, his own nephews, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and even water dripping out of the faucet. Anything that could set Donald off into one of his fabulous temper tantrums did. And in my opinion, they're some of Disney's funniest animated shorts because of it. When not being annoyed for our amusement, or letting his ego get the best of him, as in the opening credits of the Mickey Mouse Club, Donald found time to educate us with shorts like Donald in Mathmagic Land and How to Have an Accident at Work, both from 1959. These were similar to other educational shorts like Jiminy Cricket teaching us the dangers of not waiting an hour after eating to go swimming, Ludwig von Drake's A Symposium on Popular Songs, or Scrooge McDuck's Scrooge McDuck and Money. They're still fun to watch now, and you may even pick up a few things you didn't know before. The end of the war would also see Donald's success in comic books with Disney's resident duck man, Carl Barks. Donald had appeared in comic strips going back to the comic adaptation of The Wise Little Hen, and even a 1938 Donald Duck comic strip that ran daily in the papers. But by the late 1940s, Carl Barks took over as both writer and illustrator, and Donald began to be developed as an adventurer, along with his nephews and rich uncle, Uncle Scrooge. Scrooge became so popular that by 1952 he had his own comic. The comic saw the Duck family grow even more, with new characters like Flintheart Glomgold, Gyro Gearloose, and Gladstone Gander. The role of animated shorts before feature films diminished by the 1960s, but Donald and Friends would still be around, even if we saw less of them for a time. In the 1960s, Donald and the rest of the Duck family continued with educational shorts, like Donald at the Wheel and Donald's Fire Survival Plan. The 70s brought the album Mickey Mouse Disco,
Macho, macho duck. Oh, he is a manly sensation.
but it was clearly overshadowed by Rick Dees' #1 hit, Disco Duck. In the 1980s, Donald was relegated to a couple of high-profile cameo roles. First, in 1983's Mickey's Christmas Carol, in which he played Fred, Ebenezer Scrooge's nephew. Then there was 1988's Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where in a memorable scene, Donald has a piano duel with Daffy Duck from Looney Tunes. Who Framed Roger Rabbit would mark the first time that the current voice of Donald, Tony Anselmo, would voice the duck. The late 80s also brought a new appreciation for Carl Barks' comics, and they were adapted into a show, DuckTales. Donald only made a couple appearances in the original series, but played a bigger role in the 2017 reboot of DuckTales. He had a few cameos in various Disney productions in the 90s, but his most notable production was the short-lived Quack Pack, which ran for 3 months in 1996. Quack Pack made the unfortunate decision to modernize Donald and his nephews for the 90s. The result, as Doug Walker, the nostalgia critic, put it, was a Huey, Dewey, and Louie that were essentially 3 Jonathan Taylor Thomases. The show just screams mid-90s. As dated as it may be, I will say the animation is top-notch. The mid-2010s had Donald re-teamed with his friends Goofy and Mickey for a new run of Mickey Mouse cartoons that featured updated character designs and modern humor. I would have never thought this Ren and Stimpy style of humor would work for Disney characters, but these shorts are a lot of fun and absolutely hilarious. There's no telling what's next for Donald Duck, but at 91 years old, it's been quite the journey. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed my character profile on Donald Duck. If you'd like to be kept up to date as to when I release a new video, go ahead, hit that subscribe button, and if you really want to be notified, hit that bell as well. I'm Brian, and I'll see you next time on Vintage Disney.